A new blog called Learn How to Teach with Fortnite Creative in Your Classroom has recently been released on UnrealEngine.com by secondary educator Steve Isaacs. This is a great blog, and I strongly encourage you to check it out if you're interested in working with Fortnite Creative in your classroom. The actual course takes you through a series of lessons including understanding the value of game-based learning in a sandbox environment. It'll work through downloading and installing and launching Fortnite Creative, understanding how to use Fortnite in the classroom, create your own island in Fortnite, using the keyboard and mouse to navigate the Fortnite environment, learn how to use the build tools and pre-built assets included in Fortnite Creative, and build lesson plans using Fortnite Creative to teach context-specific learning outcomes. It's roughly 2.5 hours long. This and many other secondary education lesson plans are available to help empower your students to become creators. Here you will find lesson plans for Twinmotion, Unreal Engine, and more for Fortnite Creative. Hello and welcome to another Educator live stream. We have special guests today, and our stream today is called Becoming a AAA Environment Artist. And we have our special guest today, which is Scott Homer, who is a senior environment artist here at Epic Games, and Quentin Marmer. And I'm saying that in the English way and not the French way because he is from France. And he's joining us today from Vancouver. And Scott is joining us today from here in Cary, North Carolina. And as usual, we also have Tom Shannon, who is also joining us from North Carolina. And we have Mark Flanagan, who is joining us in the chat today, who will be helping us along and answering questions with everyone. So we're really excited about today's stream because we're going to be talking about building environment art, not only for games, but also for, what's really exciting, which is, Quentin comes from a film background, and Quentin worked on the Unreal Engine 5 tech demo, which you all got to see, and did a lot of the environment art in that. And Scott has been working for Epic and with Epic for about 5 or 6 years now, and has done some amazing environment art through Paragon, through Robo Recall, tons of stuff on Fortnite. And they're both going to be sharing a lot of, just really their experiences, I think, in doing amazing environment art, sharing some of their work. So, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background, and then we're going to get into it because I think we have a lot to talk about just really making good environment art in general. How about you, Scott? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So, hello everybody. As Lou said, my name's Scott Homer. I'm a senior environment artist at Epic. I've been here for 6 years. I'm originally from the UK. I've been working in games for almost 10 years now. I grew up pretty normal life, but I started making mods when I was 15 or 16, and I worked on Counter-Strike mods and just getting involved in like the online community for mods for different games. Grew up playing video games. Decided to go to college to study making games. And at the time, we weren't affiliated with Hertfordshire, but now that we are affiliated with Hertfordshire University, that was the university that I went to. And I did my 3-year. Sorry.
Awesome university, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's great. I had a great time. I mean, it was like, I got there thinking it would be like Easy Street, I guess. I thought that I've already made games. This is gonna be easy. And so like I got into the college and I basically like failed at my first year because I just like really wasn't taking it seriously. And that was the kick in the pants that I needed to be like, hey, maybe I should like, turn my life around a little bit and focus more on work and less on partying and stuff. So I
Hertfordshire, by the way, it's about an hour outside of London, and they for those of you who don't know, there's this huge international competition called the Rookies, and Hertfordshire every year now for the last, 6 or 7 years ends up being in the top, one of the top number 1 or number 2 either in the animation category or the game art or something, they end up being in the top winners of all the stuff done in Unreal.
Yeah, I mean, they really push and push and push, and so I was like, I definitely went to this big 180 and kind of had this realization of like, I got to do something about this and make sure that I like actually get somewhere at the end of my degree. So I was really active online, did a lot of Polycount, which used to be, I think Polycount's still around, but it was like a big website at the time for games art stuff, and I met a lot of people through that, and I kind of fostered like a lot of those relationships, and I was posting all my university work on there, and managed to get a job at Crytek in 2011, and so I moved there, worked on Crisis 3. I kind of got there at the end of Crisis 2. I worked on Crisis 3. Worked on Homefront 2. Then left there, worked freelance for 6 months or so with mine and Lewis's like mutual friend, a guy called Alan, who's like my best buddy, and he kind of
great guy. Yeah,
it's amazing. I mean, he runs like this outsourced studio, so he was like, hey, like, why don't you make some stuff for Tomb Raider with me? And so I was helping with Rise of the Tomb Raider for a short period while I was waiting to get my visa for Epic. And so then I moved to North Carolina in mid 2014, and then I started working on Paragon. There was a really small team working on Paragon. The whole of the company was a fair bit smaller then, so it was like the whole team of Paragon could kind of fit in one room.
I mean, we were what, 300 and so people back when you joined.
I think
Epic,
so, yeah. It was pretty tiny. So it was like, and then like the Paragon team was like, the environment team for Paragon was 2 people.
Yeah.
So, well, 2 people in the lead, so it's 3 people technically. And so it was basically like a 1 in, 1 out situation at the time. And so the only reason why I got the job at Epic in the first place was because a friend from Polycount worked at Epic, and he was the second person on the 2-man environment team. And he was like, hey, I'm leaving, but I like your work. Like, do you want to join? Do you want to come and take my place, kind of thing? And I was like, yeah, I would really like that. So,
well, that and because you're pretty good at what you do, and we'll show that in a minute. And before we introduce Quentin, I wanted just to tell a story because 6 years ago, before I joined Epic, I was a professor at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I used to, teach environment art and game modeling and all that stuff, and I also used to teach a portfolio class. And when we would do the portfolio class, I would show your portfolio specifically because, and we'll look at your stuff later. You used to do these beautiful dioramas, and you still do. And one of them was just a really good way of showing a game environment, because you have a really nice way of sort of contextualizing environment art so that, you don't have to show everything. You can sort of put things in a way that sort of tells a story in a good way. And I used to show, my students, I'm like, if you bite off more than you can chew, you're gonna introduce mediocrity into your work, and you don't want to do that. You want to do just enough to tell the right amount of story and not more, because you don't have enough time quite often. And so I'm really excited for you to share that with this audience and explain how you do that and why you do that, because I think it turns out really nicely. And that's really awesome, because I've been admiring your work for now, 7 or 8 years.
Thank you, Lewis. Appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Well, good. Anything else you want to say before we introduce Quentin?
Not really. Super happy to be here. Super happy to work at Epic. Working on Fortnite right now. I've been working on Battle Royale since beginning of Battle Royale, I think. So, it's fun. I love
it. They must like you because they give you a bunch of toys. Look at all your Fortnite toys.
That's it. I get paid in toys. I don't get paid. I just get paid in toys.
That's nice. All the stuff they give us is in black and white. At least you get some. I got one in color. The rest are like, no, it's black and white for you, buddy.
I had to I try and get the ones that like stuff that I've made for the game, like the one pickaxe that's right there. I went out to the store and bought that because I was like,
oh yeah, I would too.
That'd be good to keep in the future. That'd be good to.
This is my portfolio.
From a rocking chair, one day I'll be like, this is what I did
for children.
Well, let me introduce you to Quentin now. Quentin, I've just recently met, but I went and looked at your art station, Quentin, and I was like, "Holy camole! Look at the work this guy's done." And I think one of the things that's going to make this a very interesting stream is that you've got Scott, who has worked at Epic, and worked through Paragon and Robo Recall, and now working on Fortnite, and then has done a lot of environment art in Unreal Engine 4. And then we get to talk to Quentin, who's done work in Unreal Engine 5 on the Unreal Engine 5 demo, and really been unleashed into this amazing tool set, which, many people are very excited to get their hands on, and gotten to work with, millions and billions of polygons, and, this amazing tool set. But, you also come from a film background. So you've worked on Star Wars movies, and you've worked on Aquaman and all these things. And, I really am looking forward to you sharing with this audience your art station, and talking to people about the environment art you've done in film, and then how that sort of translate into working in Unreal Engine 5. But tell us more about yourself and your history, so that people get to know you a little bit.
So hi, I am Quentin. So I was listening to Scott, and funny enough, I started a little bit the same way. Like I wanted to code for games. That's why I've learned 3D on my own when I was a teenager at the late 90s. And from that point on, I went like full on for the art. I decided to dedicate my studies for this and all. It actually took me a long time to come back to 3D, because when I discovered art studies, I discovered an entire world, and I wanted to kind of do everything in the applied art world. So I tried design, graphic design, and then I tried animation, like traditional animation, style movies. And it took me years and years to come back to 3D, that I actually had learned pretty early. And I started to work in Paris in a very small company making commercial and game cinematics. And I was always like more dedicated for the pre-rendered type of images. I was playing less and less video games with time, and I was more and more like in movie art, and that was my goal for a long time. After 5 years working in Paris in the small studio as a CG supervisor and a commercial director, um, I decided to road, or at least I tried. I was able to do so because I got incredible opportunity to work on a short movie when I was still studying at Gobelin, a short movie that got really successful and that eventually got nominated for Academy Award. And thanks to that, it kind of opens up the possibilities for me to have an American visa and try to come to work for the. And that was a dream. I was a big Star Wars fan, and I wanted to come to ILM. Like that was the dream company, and I managed to get in there. Worked for them for about 7 years between San Francisco and Vancouver. By this time, I already became kind of pretty focused in environment. That was always my thing. Even when I was doing like more drawing and concept art, I was more in environment art, and I made this a specialty coming to ILM, because I joined ILM as what they call a generalist, which means that you do a little bit of everything, because especially in European countries, um, the idea of getting specialized is a little less common. People are usually more generalist. So I came from that background of being a generalist, pretty generalist. And in ILM, it meant environment. And yeah, and I got dedicated to it. I stayed 7 years, became supervisor in there. I had a great time, learned a lot, was very proud to work on all those big movies. But with a bit of time, we just noticed how the game technology was catching up. And to be frank, I didn't know much about it. I was just seeing those images coming on the internet, and I was more and more interested. So when I got given the opportunity to actually jump in this world and to discover about it, I didn't hesitate, and that happened kind of 1 year ago. So I'm part of the special project team in Epic, and we are more dedicated to use the new tool and try the new tool and make demo out of it, which is why we made this Unreal 5 demo. And the lead of this team is Jérôme Plateau, who happened to be a former supervisor in ILM and that I knew. And so when I was talking to him once and I told him I was really interested in everything, so he called me out and he invited me to apply for Epic. That's how I got here.
Wow, that's awesome. And Jerome is amazing. You know, I love that guy. He's, you know, just so humble, but yet so talented. And you know, I look forward to having him on the stream at some point in the future because it's so great to work with. And
I will recommend.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So what's really exciting about this stream in particular is that, you know, we really get to focus on the skills, the attention to, you know, what students in many cases need to know, what instructors need to know, what trainers need to know, what people that are preparing other people in many ways to become as good as you guys are, you know, and to, you know, or to be on the path, you know, to be able to work in the same way, you know. So, you know, you guys probably had, you know, your comeuppance, you know, your challenges in becoming epic caliber developers, ILM caliber developers, or whatever. And so, you know, part of what we do on this stream is talk about, you know, what are the things to focus on in many ways. And environment art is a very particular, you know, set of skills, a very particular set of disciplines. And there's what Tom and I and Mark do is we travel around the world, or we traveled around the world. We still do, you know, through Zoom now and through other video devices. You know, and we teach Unreal Engine, we teach Twinmotion, you know, but we also get to look at a lot of curriculums. We get to look at a lot of student works. And what we notice is that there's still a lot of students that have a tremendous amount of interest in environment art, you know, prop modeling, you know, and we look at a lot of reels coming out of universities all over the world. And there's a huge focus on environment art. You know, many students love to make their reels, and they love to show their environments. And, you know, when you think about game art, or when you think about, you know, even in film programs and television programs, or just general 3D programs, there's a lot of people that are focusing on environment art. So we really wanted to have this stream and talk to guys like yourself, you know, one that, you know, maybe is still more in the current gen, you know, Scott, like yourself, and one that is more focused on the next generation, Unreal Engine 5, Quentin, like yourself, and kind of talk about maybe what are some of the things that both students and educators and trainers might be able to be focusing on, and what helpful things, what relevant things we can give them to prepare, you know, to raise the bar, become better at teaching and training. You know, what are the things that you do every single day to do your job at the highest level that you can? You know, so that we can get it out here, so we can put it here, you know, in this stream, so we can put it in the VOD, so we can get it later on YouTube, so that people can rewatch it and go, well, you know, as I'm preparing my syllabus, as I'm going to make a new YouTube video about an environment art, you know, video, or whatever the case is, or I go and prepare something, I need to keep these things in mind. So what we're going to do in the stream is kind of talk about some of these things, and then I'm going to invite both Scott and Quentin to you know, do their own little presentation or whatever to talk about some of these things, because these are really important things. We have been recently going over lots and lots of reels. We invite people to submit their reels to us, and we review them, and we get, I don't know what you would say, Tom, but maybe 60%, 70% are environment reels sometimes. There's a lot of them. So
yeah. Especially these days, I think, you know, once you mix in the arc viz and, you know, kind of product viz, and there's a lot of environment art. And even when it's character art or effects reels, there's still often environment art involved in there, whether it's they're building environments or getting environments or reappropriating some marketplace content or whatever to show their characters or whatever. I think far more often you'll end up with environment art just as part of it, even if it's even if we're looking at gameplay, there's still the environment art in there, etc. So it creeps into a lot more places than character art does, or those really specific things like Niagara. And student demo reels just there is a lot of environment art, and it's the quality that's coming out these days is astounding.
It really is. There's some remarkable quality.
We saw that reel at the beginning of the show, and it's
chock full of amazing stuff.
It's just going so quickly up. But it is really important for those students and the instructors to get the insight from you guys who are doing this top level stuff, because it's pretty special for us to be able to have you on here and share you with our community, and share your knowledge and your experience. It's really valuable. So thanks for being on.
Yeah. So let's do something. I think that we've talked, a little bit during the week as we were preparing the stream. Let's define environment art a little bit more clearly, because I think that, there's prop modelers, and then there's environment artists, and there's skills that are specific to those sub-disciplines, right? So, what would you say if I had to ask you, Quentin, how do you define environment art, specifically coming from film and going into your experience recently in the UE5 demo?
Well, it's a good question, because as I was describing before, for example, in ILM, it's specific for ILM, but environment is considered the generalist. The 3D generalists are making environment. And usually, people working in environment are maybe a little less specialized and a little more general, because you kind of need to know how to do everything. When you work on a character, you see a lot of people super dedicated for character modeling. Some other people super dedicated for character texturing. And I think one of the reasons for this is that the character is the hero. So it needs an amount of detail that you're going to focus on every single part of the character. Then in a sense, it kind of needs more work. It's less generical than having a rock in a corner or a tree, or, you can have hero characters in an environment too, but in general, the character is the hero, which is why you kind of have this dedication happening. In environment, you make what we used to say the rest of the real estate of the image, and you are usually covering more, and maybe you're going to focus a little less on the detail and more look at the bigger picture, which implies that you need to be able to do a lot of everything more, which is why, more generalist. If that answers the question.
Yeah. And what would you say are involved in that generalist skill set? Would you say, things like lighting?
It's actually literally everything. Like, you need to know modeling because you're gonna model the elements of your environment. So okay, maybe a little less about super detailed ZBrush character where you're gonna make all the details. Even though I know some environment artists who are entirely modeling their environment in ZBrush, but there are also a lot of other tools available for this. But okay, modeling for this, then texture, because you're not gonna have texture artists dedicated to texture the rocks. It's kind of more generic. I want to say maybe one of the I didn't say that by order of importance, but maybe one of the most important is how to know how to make a good-looking picture. Like not every photos are worth being taken, and when you are presenting an environment, it's not the character by itself on a turntable. It's an image. It's a frame. That's something you could hang on the wall, almost. So you need to know how to build your frame, to the composition, to play with the colors. So yeah, it brings a lot of skills needed. But as I was saying, there's modeling, there's texture, there is the rendering for the lighting, because the lighting is fully part of what you are showing, what you are telling with your environment. And then, well, I guess between games and movies pretty different, because the way we are rendering we are rendering a lot of frames, still frame that eventually makes a motion. Where in game you are creating 3D environment as an asset in which you are,
moving through,
traveling.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different approach, but yeah. So I that's how I would describe it. Why you need to be maybe a bit more generalist for environment.
Right. So you need to be more like a filmmaker in essence, where you understand the the lens
well,
and
I'm
those
probably
parts.
very biased in that point of view, because I'm coming from the movie industry.
Right.
So I am fairly recent to the game industry, and I have worked my environment always this way, as a nice looking picture. I'm making a nice image. But now coming to game, it's almost the same. It's just, in a sense, it's my opinion. Not everybody shares it, but in a sense, it's more difficult game, because you never know what the framing will be. You never know how. So it needs to look good from every angle, in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no place to hide.
Exactly. and every pieces in your environment needs to have detail, or at least the same amount of detail, because you have a potential for the player to be close to that place.
Yeah.
And players always, if you have an art bug in a level for whatever reason, they seem to just turn the camera straight to it and zoom straight into it every time. I don't know what. It's a very special skill they have. That's something that is also for lots of industries, not just people coming from film, but any kind of linear industry that's kind of starting to move into Unreal in games kind of experiences that sudden reality that they have to complete this entire environment around this shot, because now this shot is completely free. And it takes a very different mindset and a different idea of how long it's going to take to build the environment, because no longer is it literally just in a camera fresh room.
My first job, it was like, I got there, straight out of college, and my first day, I was like, okay, what props need to be made? Where's the trash cans? I want to make some trash cans. And they were like, no, you're an environment artist. You do everything. You got to make a whole scene. And right now we're blocking out this whole game. So you're not making props. You're making, blocking out levels and composition. And it was such a huge, rude awakening that, the job is not just making trash cans and hero props. It's making reusable stuff that you can use to build the whole composition, and the lighting and composition, and leading a player through a scene or through a level visually is so much more of the job than I ever thought it would be. And then as time goes on, the more you the more experience you get, the more senior you get, the less props you get given, just out of the fact that it's from a business perspective, in any industry, it's it becomes cheaper to outsource, or to get outsource assets, or we can get marketplace assets that are already made. And so at that point, it's your time is better spent taking those assets and making a scene out of them, and compositing a level, versus making the nitty gritty. As much as I love doing the nitty gritty, I'd happily spend every day making trash cans and after trash cans. It's not the job, It just becomes it's that thing as well of getting a consistent amount of detail throughout the whole scene. If you focus in that closely on a trash can, it's going to be really difficult to compose a whole scene that is of an equal level of quality.
It becomes inconsistent, right? You develop inconsistencies.
That consistency and that skill set is not something that I think you can kind of learn academically. It's really something that's just born of experience and lots of failure of getting back lots of reports from QA that your players can't figure out what the heck to do. And you're like, I've tried everything. I put a light there, I put a ramp there, I made a big explosion come out, and they still can't. That's, you can teach some of that stuff, but as you're saying, it's easier to learn how to model a trash can. It's a lot harder to learn when to put the trash can in a certain spot in a level. And that as you get further in your career, that you get better at that. and that becomes a bigger part of your responsibility and less than
I
that
wanna
basic.
I wanna bounce back on what you're saying. No, so the example of trash can is interesting. It's, as you said, it's much more difficult to make a good environment, and focusing on the trash can is not going to help with that. And I want to say it's not the it's one of the easiest things to do in there. So that's the thing you cannot put aside and say, okay, maybe I'm going to buy an already made trash can, because trash can itself is not going to make my environment better in more detail. Now, also what you were saying before is how we can, the way to learn how to make the good environment. There is a key thing that I learned over the years and I've been taught, and that when you're making an environment, you still, the same way you're making a character, every time you make a piece of art, even though this is a word in that industry, but every time you make a piece of art, it's always the same thing. It's like how you are telling a story. So for any environment you're doing or every character, what makes it interesting is the story you're telling with it. You know, you can make something, you can make super photoreal or impressive trash cans everywhere. If you are not telling anything with it, then nobody's going to really care about this. You know?
Right, right.
I agree, and I mean, I've always like had this like mentality of like I try and make a room look as amazing as possible when it's empty. You know, like if you can make a room that looks like really, really nice, but it has nothing in it, then like putting the stuff in it is like putting the, you know, the whipped cream and the cherry on top of the ice cream. You know, it's like if you can tell a story through the materials in a room and the lighting in a room,
Mm-hmm.
it's always just going to just look better as soon as you stop putting those props in at the end. You know, so.
So a good question actually came through, and someone's asking, can you describe your process, when you're building an environment as an environment artist, all the way through from, gathering your reference to how you might block it out to, putting in maybe your hero props and your structures to then doing your integration to, you know, and I know that this is a big question, so maybe before you get into sharing your work, when you might be able to describe it again as we're looking at your actual environment pieces, can you give us a high level overview of how you approach your process of doing an environment? Is it consistent, or do you change it all the time, or
I mean, I can start answering it, but the way I look at it is there are two differences. Is first obviously what you're going to do, and the second important is the scope of what you are trying to do. Like, if you are making an environment which is 10 miles by 10 miles, and you need to have the player go in there and all, there is a lot of the technical aspect that the technical aspect has a lot of importance. You're not going to be able to put the insane amount of detail you need to make this or this look good the same way. Now, for the simple process, usually is like, okay, you make a desert. So I'm going to gather all the images, reference images on the internet. I'm making a giant stack of image. And I usually take quite a bit of time doing this, trying to get immersed in the thing and try to, recognize the clues of what are the gimmicks out of this that makes what I'm looking for. I was talking about desert, so there are tons of different deserts. But what is it? What is the desert they want to do exactly? What is it they are looking for? That, like with the sands, are they looking at dunes? Are they looking at this type of rocks, red rocks, black rocks? Well, and if it's black rocks, so why they have chosen it? What story are they trying to tell? And by piling up all those references, you are looking for the clues, looking for the most iconic things that they want to see in there, and then it's just for you're gonna get asked to reproduce that. So the next process is how you going. So it depends a lot on what you are doing. What I'm trying to do is to usually choose the best tool for what I have to do. We have amazing tools to make trees. Something, a software called There are a ton of different ways to model trees, but speed tree does it very well and is the most popular thing out there. So if I need to make trees, I would use speed tree. Nowadays, if I need to use rocks, I'm going to use Megascan because that's the best tool out there for this, Now, based on this, you're starting to look at the constraints that it represents. Okay, Megascan, they are providing you rocks, but it's this size, and then you need to make a mountain out of it. So if you that thing is going to start to see.
Right.
So then you just add one by one the layers of constraints that you're going to have for the scope of your environment.
Great answer.
I've always like started off like I'll do the same thing. Like the reference gathering is like, you're only as good as your references, right? Like you can't make this stuff off the top of your head, so you always have to have good references. But the one thing that I hate doing, and the thing that I force myself to do, is just blocking out. It's like eating vegetables. Like I hate. It's like you have to eat your veggies, and you don't want to do it, but the more you the more you block a scene out, and the more the better it looks in blockout phase. Like it all informs the decisions that they're gonna affect the end result. So I'll I'll force myself, and I can feel myself sometimes not blocking out.
Can I ask you a question before you go on? So you're involved a lot with gameplay. So do you block out playtest, block out, or do you have much opportunity to do that? I mean, if you're working in battle royale levels, do you have much opportunity before you get deep into environment art, getting feedback from a playtest so that you don't end up doing a lot of environment art that has to be redone because it doesn't test well or anything like that?
So we definitely work hand in hand with the level designers. So the level designers will build a rough layout, and they'll be like, hey, can you block this thing out that looks like this? It needs to fill the space. Here's a box, the space it's going to fill, and I'll throw together just a gray box that's like a 5-minute model or a 10-minute model or a half an hour model and nothing with any details.
Yeah.
We'll throw it in. We'll run around it with collision on, and then we'll play tests and then start to make adjustments. It's just so much easier to make adjustments when it's a gray box, right, than it is once it's an actual finished model. So it's not until everyone's signed off on it and everyone's has given their thumbs up to the fact that it plays well that we really start making anything that's too unchangeable,
right.
Too final.
I mean, that's one question. And the other one is that, Fortnite in particular has a lot of important set piece vistas and things like that are also, you have to come over thing and go like, oh, wow, look at that. That's amazing, which I imagine you're responsible for. I know you are because you've made some really important set piece environments where, you have to take the player's breath away or something like that. And that's hard because players come from everywhere in Battle Royale, and you have to go and look at it from this angle and that angle and go, wow, it's impressive from all angles. Like that's got to be something else that must be challenging as an environment artist.
Yeah, I think the thing that can be challenging is that you make it, like you said, you make it with that one reveal in mind, and you'll be building an environment with the player's pathway through it in mind, but they can, especially in Fortnite, they can just hack the walls down and go straight through it, So it's like you have to kind of let go of that sometimes, I guess, and just be like, okay, this is the intention, but if they don't see it this way, then but a lot of it is signposting, a lot of it is leading the player through, and that's really good level design. We'll have designers that are just great at funneling players into a position where they can get the best view and they can see the game way that we want it to be seen. It's a lot easier in games.
I'm always really impressed with the subtleties of level design, with making sure that you can see the next area over the hill, in an open world kind of like Fortnite. Like if you're down in a crater, you need to be able to see up on the ridges to know kind of which way to go and guide, even though it's this seemingly endless open world. Every one of those areas has been handcrafted, and someone has gone in and thought about the player's path, like you're saying.
Definitely. That's just from playtesting and experience, of some of us have been on this for however many seasons, many seasons, and it's like the trial and error of seeing what works in one season and then kind of bringing it into the next.
So the relationship between the environment artist, in the games that you're working in, and the environment artist and the level designers and the designers in general are really quite important, quite critical to craft the experience, you know. And so if you're an instructor, if you're a student and you're trying to work by yourself, you know, in a gameplay environment, that's probably not going to work as well as you had hoped, you know. And if you were not in that place, if you were making a, you know, a big set piece for yourself and you're working and I got to say, you know, having taught this for many years, I'd go up to a student and they're making this amazing thing and I'm like, where's your reference? And they're like, no, it's all coming out of my head. I'm like, that's not going to turn out well. You know, you're inventing worlds and
that's very true. I've seen
that's not going to turn out well.
Me too.
You know,
actually had that once in my like first job when I was actually showing somebody, not gonna name any names, showing somebody my like personal work. And they were like, hey, so where's your reference? And I was like, yeah, I don't have any. And they were like, wow, that's like such an amateur thing to do. And I was like,
well, and you can tell, you know, when we're looking at reels. Burn. Well, and they knew. The thing is, they knew, and that's why they asked, because, you know, it's something that stands out when I'm looking at reels, and I can see good, like fundamental, like, oh, they're really good at modeling and lighting and texturing on their own, but the scene doesn't make any sense. Why is the cabin at the bottom of the ravine? And like, you know, and these are the sorts of things that reference will inform you of, because you'll go, oh, yeah, that you'd probably build your house at the top of the hill rather than the bottom, because that's all these pictures of houses are at the tops of hills. This makes more sense.
I want to add this, that, you know, young artists, when they're starting, there is a myth of being able, when you are an artist, you are able to produce anything out of your mind, out of your head, which we know it's not true when you have more experience. But when you see all those nice things coming, you know, you go on ArtStation, you are inspired by all those crazy artists, amazing things, and you look at the games and you look at the movies, and you're like, okay, those artists are able to spit out images and or spit out things out of their mind, and that's why it's so unbelievable. The truth is, it's not true, and I think it's very important to say that there is no shame on using references and trying to mix it up to make something of your own, but use references just to make sure that what you are doing is grounded in reality.
So agree. That's super good advice.
Well, let me ask a couple of other questions that I think are really important for those you know, teaching and working in this space. There are a lot of other things related to environment art, you know, specifically with Unreal Engine. And sometimes you don't have to do this and sometimes you do. But Scott, I know that having worked in and around you, not in or I don't, you know, having working around you, is that you have to import content into the engine. And sometimes when you import content into Unreal, that's specific skill set. So sometimes you have to make your own collision. Sometimes you have to make your own light map UVs. Sometimes you have to make LODs for your content. And, you know, then you have to organize it and all that stuff. And yes, sometimes you have a technical artist that does that for you. Sometimes you have to make your own materials and material instances and all that stuff. And if you don't know that, then you come into it at a deficit. And so, you know, I know you do that stuff because you make your own work and you're actually quite skilled at that stuff. And I imagine that's a great advantage. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to be skilled at those things?
Yeah, I think that kind of speaks to what Quentin was saying about being a generalist, right? Like,
yeah.
it is about having those, like, you're basically, I've always been told that like being an environment artist is kind of like being a problem solver more than anything. It's like, and you know, often you'll be given an area to just make it look good. You know, like, here's a block, I make it look good. And there are so many elements, so many facets to that. And being able to make materials and shaders, even simple materials and shaders in Unreal Engine is so useful. You know, it's I'm not great at it. I've got a working knowledge of making materials in Unreal Engine, so I will like be able to make something that will get me at least most of the way there. And for the most part, that normally helps. Or that's normally enough. But if it hits a point where it's like needs something that's really, really technical, that's when the technical artist will step in, and I'll give them like basically like a previs material I'm like, hey, I want it to do this, but I also want it to have these features that involve maths that I'm not able to do. And so they will like, at least from a professional perspective, it's always great to have those technical guys that can just step in and take that shader and then kind of run with it. And that happens a lot on every game. I think it'll be there are some shaders that are just too difficult for somebody that doesn't specialize in shaders to make, like water and glass and things like that can just be very, very complicated.
Especially if you have Ryan Brooks at your call, second call, and you're like, here you go.
I was like, my first introduction to Ryan Brooks was like when I first got to Epic, someone was like, this is Ryan. He's a magician. And then that was like, and then like every time I'd see like the stuff that he did, I'd be like, yeah, that guy's a magician pretty much. So, but yeah, it's just that generalist workflow, right? Of just like having a working knowledge of every element of the engine. You don't have to be an expert in it, but you have to just be able to use it to get the end result that you want. And you never want to
ask. Oh, I'm sorry.
Carry on. Sorry.
I want to ask in the same vein. I think this is interesting because Quentin, you brought it up about this generalist, and that there isn't, like, when you're building an environment, you're doing everything from nuts to bolts, and you can even see it on your ArtStation. You have, all the way back to a substance material, like, that's way before it gets into engine, etc. You're ZBrushing and building everything. And I think that there's, and maybe I'd like to know, and I think our audience would like to know, like, what's the difference between, like, Hollywood? Is Hollywood more specialized than gaming? I think that there's maybe a conception that there's like texture artists and modelers, and then someone who puts it in the level, and then someone who lights the level. And I think in some productions there are, but I'd like, what we're hearing, I think, is more that it's really much more often that it's general. But I'd like to know from you guys, like, what do you think?
In the visual effects industry, Hollywood, for the movies, most of the companies have specialized departments. There is the molding department, lighting, animation department, rigging department. It's very compartmentalized. At the exception of the environment. Usually, the environment is more generalist. Now, there are the reasons that I've mentioned before, where because you are covering more real estate, you have to touch more types of props. Maybe you have to participate in the lighting, you have to participate in the blocking with the layout. So there is all of this involved. It kind of gathered everything. But I also think that it's kind of a legacy on how things just came up. I know some companies are more specialized environment where you're gonna have only digital matte artists. Like what we call digimat is like literally the painting. Now it's Photoshop. It's a little less painting. It's more like making sure assemble elements to make matte painting. But some environment are specialized in this. Some other environment are more specialized in the CG environment. It kind of depends. But the place I'm coming from, Industrial Light and Magic, they have a generalist department where everything. The special project team in Epic is the same. We are generalists like this. We have to do a little bit of everything. There is one thing that I want to underline, though, giving all of this. It is not because a lot of the industry has to be specialized to produce higher quality and more of the same thing that you don't know how the rest is working. There is nothing more frustrating in this industry. Face somebody who's super good and specialized at what he's doing, but has no idea of what you are doing, and then all the departments are always interacting with each other, always, and that will always be. There is no way around this. It's like you are building a car. It's a building chain, and you have to know how things are going all the way in order to make the most efficient work and the most efficient way to produce it. So what I was saying is, like, there is nothing more frustrating to have somebody that doesn't understand that if you need things to be done this way, it's for a very good reason, because your work implies this and this and this. And the only thing that he's seeing is the scope of his task. So even though Hollywood, I know less about the game, but I know there are departments too. But even though there are specialization, we should always be a little bit generalist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great. Well, there's a lot more that we can talk about, and I think I'm excited to talk about it. But I'd really love to jump into your portfolios and have you take us through some of these things that we've already talked about, and maybe if you you'd point out some of the opportunities that you had to sort of do some of the work that we're describing. Scott, would you like to jump in and take us through some of that material, and then when we come back out, we can jump into some of the other topics that we.
I could do that. I could definitely show some of the stuff that I've been doing in the past. Would it be useful to show my student reel, do you think, or should we jump into some?
Oh, would you show us your student reel?
I will show you that, and it's very embarrassing, but it also shows a lot about where I came from and how I got into games a little bit, because it has kind of speaks to some of the points that we were talking about. So let me share my screen. Okay. Cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to mute this and talk over it because it's got music. But yeah, this was from 2011. Actually, it was probably more likely 2010. I just posted in 2011, and this is that I used for to get my first job. I'm going to go through this. This one is a really good example because I was tailoring my portfolio to working at Crytek. I always wanted to work on Crysis. That was my dream studio. I realized this is not amazing. At the time, it's terribly lit, and I'm super embarrassed by it. But it was the vehicle in the game was what I wanted to. I wanted to make a vehicle that could go into Crysis, but I also wanted to show that I had an understanding of how the games industry works. And so I made LUDs, which nobody at the company had ever seen a student do before. Show a portfolio that had LUDs in it.
What year was this already? This was
What year?
Yeah.
This is 2010.
2010.
And so I made a few scenes. Everything was literally catered towards working at Crytek. That was my dream. And at the time, that was the company I went to work for in the UK. The idea of ever working at Epic had never even entered my mind, just because it seemed like such an impossible dream. And so I made a showreel, which is not something that I've ever done since. But it was just, make a few props, and it was like, and each of these scenes just kind of served to show off like some skill that I had that I thought I had at the time, of like making a scene or making grass or trash cans, a lot of trash cans, a lot of aircon units. I also wanted to work on Tomb Raider, so I made a Tomb Raider scene. And it's funny how, I wanted to work at Crytek and I wanted to work on Tomb Raider, and then I ended up working at Crytek and then working on Tomb Raider.
And there you go. Well done. You win.
Nailed it.
Well, that's it. Well, this kind of speaks to the point of like aiming your student portfolio at the job that you want. I think I see a lot of people that they have their student portfolio and it's just a kind of a scatter shot that kind of tries to please as many people as possible without pleasing anybody.
Geo there.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Nice clean geo. You want a job?
This goes in the yes pile, Lewis.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it basically. So that's my student reel, and then so that kind of brings us up.
But I saw. I went back into the life drawing.
Yeah, that was another thing.
Escape it.
I was supposed to do life drawing as well at college, so I thought. I mean, that was not great.
But sometimes, and that's important because often when you're graduating, you have to make a reel to graduate, and it has to check a bunch of boxes for the school. And often that reel and that flat portfolio and those things that they want you to develop to graduate might not be what you want to show potential employers, because like you said, there's scattershot. So, if you want a job at Crytek, your portfolio should lead with your stuff that looks like their stuff, even if your school was like, no, put your watercolors up front. They're your best work.
And that was why
Ignore
I included
them.
it. I was told to include it, and I put it in there. And I remember in the interview they were like, "Yeah, let's pretend we didn't see that one. let's pretend that the show all stopped before the live drawing showing."
I'm sorry to call you out on it. You tried to stop it before.
I tried to stop it, but you caught it. No, it's fine. I mean, it's a fair point as well. It speaks to that point.
I remember also that you this was important, that you had recreated a BioShock level in Unreal Engine 4, right? Like that was something I used to show all the time.
So this is actually CryEngine 3.
Oh,
so that was back then I was working at Crytek, and so I just had like the tool that I knew about the most was CryEngine, and so I decided that my next goal at that point was I wanted to work on BioShock. You know, it was my favorite game, and so I decided I was going to make a homage to BioShock, and this actually was life-changing for me. Like, it's funny to think of something like this, like in 2012, being life-changing, a scene but if it wasn't for this scene and the subsequent breakdown that I did, and then the kind of media buzz
Vertex,
that was captured by the BioShock scene, I would never have been able to move to America. It's kind of like how Quentin was saying that his short that got nominated for an Academy Award was like that allowed him the avenue to move to America. In the same way, this kind of gave me the avenue to move to America, was having the media buzz that came around this. And so it was a simple scene that recreated in my own vision like an area in the game that I thought that would be cool. And the funny thing about it is that I think I did a decent job of it, because the people kept using it. People from the company that makes BioShock were using it in their adverts sometimes. So I'd be like seeing a screenshot of my fan art, and it'd be like in the old school banner ads on websites, and it would be like the screenshot would just cropped and then BioShock over the top of it. And I'd get emails sometimes from people being like, "Hey man, I just saw this advert and it uses," or "I just saw this merch and it used the image that you made."
That's hilarious.
And so from there, that was at the same time as I was working on Crysis 3. So in my portfolio, I've got some shots from when I was working on some of the multiplayer levels that were used in the game. And this is obviously a team effort, so this isn't all me. This is I had a small part of constructing the whole scene and lighting it and whatnot. And some a lot of the background props and things were made by other artists. And so the way that we worked at the time at Crytek was we teamed up in teams of 2 artists, and so we would share the responsibility of constructing a level. These are back in, I think, 2012 probably. Sorry, 2013 this was released, but it was probably made in about 2012. And at that point, I'd never used Unreal Engine, so I was completely a noob. So I just used what I knew, which was CryEngine. And then when the opportunity to work at Epic came up, I kind of was just like, I better learn Unreal Engine pretty quick because I don't know how to use it. And so I completely transitioned from working in CryEngine to working in Unreal Engine. My thing's going crazy right now. So a lot of at the same time of doing all this stuff, I was doing a lot of personal work. So the BioShock stuff was personal work. These scenes were just renders that I did in my own time, just for fun. A lot of the times it was just to learn a new skill or learn a tool that I hadn't used before. So I was just constructing props, a lot of them being game ready props that I could, just see they were working towards this this idea of them being able to be used in a video game. And I mentioned before polycount, I'd often include the symbol for polycount in a lot of my work.
It's before you fell in love with cars, isn't it?
This is pretty much before I fell in love with cars. Yeah, that was yeah. This is before I fell in love with cars and I moved to America. This is all in the UK. So, but I'd make things. I'd always be really careful about showing my high res and my low res and my working files. Showing my UVs and showing my normal maps and whatnot, just so that people knew that I had a strong grip on how to make environment art.
Tightly packed UVs and all that stuff.
Exactly. Because the beauty of personal work is that you don't have to do this stuff, but I was always showing this stuff off was just so that I could kind of have that as a thing that if I ever came to an interview, I could be like, hey, I definitely know how to pack UVs. I know how to dilate my textures and that kind of thing. And so this is the point where I decided that I wanted to start working at Epic. And so I was like, okay, well, what does Epic do? At the time, it was like just getting to the end of Gears of War. I was like, well, Epic do destruction. They do super detailed, like ornate filigree. And I was like, I'm going to start tailoring my portfolio towards working at Epic. And so I started building these dioramas. I've done a few of them now. I've only got a couple of them on my portfolio, but they're just a great way of like showing a self-contained scene that shows like, you know, you can construct walls, floors, ceilings, but also props in light. You can do particles, but you also don't bite off like way more than you can chew. You know, it's like an easy thing to do in the space of a few months, or, you know, a month or two, rather than something that's going to take months and months and months, even years. You know,
this is the scene I would show my students constantly and say, you know, this is this is what you should be thinking about instead of, you know, overscoping your project. Think about something, a beautiful corner, right? This is literally a beautiful corner.
Exactly. I mean, it's something that you can kind of extrapolate out, right? You know what the rest of the room would look like, and a lot of these props could be used to fill out a whole level if they wanted to. It's just you are only one person, and better to make something that you don't want to feature creep and the scope to get so big that you can't even finish the scene because
it becomes mediocre when you try and do too much, right? Like
exactly. And so that's something that
be mediocre to go work at Epic Games or anywhere else, really, you know.
So this is the point that I started to like really focus on Epic. I was like, hey, you know, they do this tons of detail in their stuff. I also really liked Harry Potter at the time, so I was like, you know, let's make some stuff that's really detailed that the guys at Epic could see, you know. And then I was releasing like breakdowns and doing like a lot of videos showing my work. Turn the music. But I was showing like, you know, my wireframes and my turnarounds and stuff so that people could see that this stuff was like game ready. This stuff was like could go in a video game and could go in their video game. And yeah, I'd be trying to push the envelope as well of using like things like at the time like displacements were new. It was like a fairly new thing in games, so I was like trying to test out using displacements. And so eventually I got the job at Epic and started working on Paragon. And so Paragon was like a lot of this like super detailed, super heavy ZBrush stuff. And that was actually quite a bit of crossover at the time with the special projects team, where we had like some members from that team were involved in the Paragon project. So there was like a lot of those like that movie mentality came into, you know, being really, really careful and deliberate about lighting and
Go with us, Scott.
I wasn't sure who had dropped out there.
Yeah, I can still hear you guys, but
oh, and then his picture has disappeared.
He's coming back.
I'm back.
Yep, there we go.
Oh, you're back.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. What point did I did you lose me?
Just a few seconds. Please continue. Yeah, you're good.
Well,
nope, you're frozen again.
Uh-oh.
The internets. Hello, internets.
Oh, this. Of the internet.
Yes. Hello, Scott.
At least it paused on a flattering pause for him.
Well, let's see if he'll come back, and we'll let him come back, and we'll continue with him. Oh, maybe he's rejoining here. Let's give him a second. There you are.
Hey, I'm back.
Yay, Scott. All right.
Sweet. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Not sure what happened there. Do we want to go back to sharing screens, or is that risky?
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free to just jump right back in.
Okay, screen 2. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So yeah, at that point we were just So at that point we were just working on Paragon. It was a lot of like super high poly, like all the skills that I'd learned from trying to tailor my portfolio was Epic, was kind of exercised in working on Paragon. So it was a lot of just really, really high poly modeling, but then also baking it down to be really low poly so that we could get it to run fast on consoles and get it to run fast on PC in a competitive game. So I put a lot of that in my portfolio as well. What else would be useful to show? So at the same time,
The material work in Paragon, if anybody goes and downloads the assets, the materials are a little maybe advanced, I think is the word. They're some of the most they kind of use like every feature, every trick we've got in them, and in a very interesting kind of workflow way that I think is fairly unique in a lot of ways for the way that was set up.
Definitely. I mean, that was really, it's pushing the engine to its limits. At that point, it was like we were just really trying to make something that like it could run fast, but also look amazing. And it was really cool just to be like have those the engineers and the tech guys just really pushing the engine to its limits. And the result was great. I thought it looked really cool at the time.
It's really astounding how cool it looks and how neat that workflow is. And it's fun to use those assets. But every time I open up the materials, I'm just like, whoa, that's hard for me to follow. That's some advanced stuff.
Now, it must have been something to go from Paragon to Robo Recall, which was a VR project that ended up looking this amazing because, that had to run at 120 frames a second,
exactly.
with 2 eyes.
And that was working with Jerome, that Quinton mentioned that he works with on special projects. And so Jerome was really pushing and pushing and pushing. And that was like, we had to work really hard to get this to look as good as it possibly could, but also run, like you said, at a frame rate that was serviceable for the generation of VR that we were using at the time. So we had some more levels that we did for Robo Recall, and these shipped to the game, and it was just it was really cool working in VR, just because you have this you can tell scale so much easier when you're in it, when you're in it flying around completely with your complete attention on the game. You know how big a brick is because or if you know that the scale is wrong on bricks because you can feel it. You can feel that that the scale of the brick is wrong, but you could feel the spaces between areas were too big because you're actually in it and it feels like you're in the world with it.
So a lot of that abstraction and kind of trickery that we get away with in 2D presentations of 3D spaces doesn't really work so much in VR.
Exactly. It just it really opens up a whole new avenue of being able to be connected with your artwork and really know how things should feel.
Now, can you talk a little bit about being an environment artist in a VR game and not having some of the conventions you might have, when you're talking about presenting something on a 2D screen versus stereoscopic, when, you might not have some things like, like you don't have, I know you used ambient occlusion, but there's things that you don't want to use in stereoscopic rendering, and you're scale is one of the things you brought up. Are there other things that you have to consider when you're doing VR environment art?
I'd say so. I think one of this scene here kind of shows a lot of that. It's like we found that the movement was really good. Having a scene feel alive. I mean, that's kind of goes for anything, but like having the papers be ruffling on the table and having the fans be moving and having these moving shadows really made it feel a lot more realistic and believable, which is really hard to achieve as well in a game that has to run at 120 frames per second. But it became evident that stationary scenes when you're in VR feel really dead, and so we did have to put a lot of work into making things feel alive by having that movement. And it was great to see that. It was great to put your headset on and sit there and be like, okay, something's missing. I can feel it. Let's fix that, And was a really, really fun project to be on at the time, because it was just, you felt like you were on the cutting edge. I'm sure that Quinton knows exactly how that feels right now, you know, being on the cutting edge, but at the time that it felt like being on the cutting edge as well. And it was really fun. It was definitely something that I enjoyed. And so after that, I went back onto Paragon for a while. And so I did some Paragon stuff. But at the same time as doing Paragon stuff, I started to decide that I wanted to do dioramas again and do some personal work again. And so I started to put out these like self-contained dioramas in Unreal Engine. Kind of build them.
This is an important thing, and I wanted to kind of bring this up because, you know, I've had students in the past that I would see them a year after, or they, you know, I left teaching college and I came to work for Epic, and they'd say, "Hey, I'd like to get an internship or come to work at Epic," and I'd say, "Great, show me your portfolio, your reel, whatever," and I would look at it, and there was really very little different than what they showed me before. And I said, "Well, what have you been doing? Where's all your new stuff?" And they're like, "Oh, I've been so busy, you know, I've been working a lot." And I would say, it just doesn't work that way. You know, you have to constantly be working. And the point being is that you work 8-10 hours a day, you know, at Epic doing environment art. Then you come home and work a whole lot more and do these personal projects. You know, the point is, I think that an environment artist is an environment artist, and I think that's that really, you can't not be doing this stuff, right? Like, I think most really good environment artists that I know are just compelled to do this, and you may do this all day long, and this is true, I think, for character artists and audio, you know, people and whatever. You know, you just do it constantly because that's what you do, and if you work all day long, you end up doing more of when you get home, right?
Definitely. I think it's like, for me, it's a lot of keeping the voice in my head away that tells me that I'm like falling behind. You know, it's like, you never want to be, I always feel myself like fearing falling into obscurity or falling out of the industry by just not keeping up with my portfolio and keeping up with like current techniques. And so I'd always just be like doing this personal work, just so that I could like have it to show, you know, or I could have it to make myself feel like, okay, you know, I've done something that I can show this month or this year, you know. And it's super important, I think, it's just to keep your skills fresh. You got people in the company, you know, like Quinton, it's super intimidating to work with somebody that's like, you know, super experienced. And I'm like, hey, okay, I gotta keep in the race, you know, I gotta keep like my skills sharp. And so a lot of that is just going home and practicing new stuff and learning new techniques. And, you know, like, for example, in this one, I'd never used Marmoset Toolbag before to render a real-time scene from my portfolio. So I figured that I would do some modeling, and then I could stick in my portfolio. And then, you know, each time I would remove something from my student days that was weaker, and just try and keep my portfolio fresh. And so that was around this time that I started working on Fortnite. And so we started working on originally making pickaxes, was because there were so few people working on it at the time that we just had to be all hands on deck and just make what needed to be made for the game.
I remember when you told me you were making pickaxes. I'm like, what are pickaxes for?
Exactly. Yeah, that one's this one here. That one's like the candy cane guy.
How surreal is that to like hold
it's very strange.
an injection molded plastic version of something you sculpted?
Exactly. Yeah, it was very strange. It was very unusual. I mean, it was really fun, and the hard surface team are amazing. So getting to work with those guys for a few months was really fun. I mean, that's once again goes back to that whole thing Quinton was saying about being a generalist, right? It's like, you know, I'd never thought that I'd make a first-person weapon for a game, or a third-person weapon for a game. And then here you are, you know, you just kind of get dropped into the situation where you're making weapons for a game.
And what a stylistic change too.
Exactly. So that was the thing as well. It was like super intimidating to move from doing this kind of like stylized realistic stuff that I was doing from my whole career, then doing stuff that was like more cartoony and stylized, and had this really, really like well thought out style that had been like established over the years, and I was just joining, quite late in the game and having to adopt that, So from an environment perspective, the point where it started to get super interesting, I think, was on season 4. We started to just really go hard on.
You made the fork knife?
Yeah, I did. That was awesome.
Nice.
Someone was like, "Hey, have you heard about this new meme?" And I was like, "I've heard of fork knife. I've heard of that meme." And they were like, "Sweet. Well, we need a fork knife truck." So a lot of what Fortnite is just taking assets and we can do skins for them, and we can make them. We could take something that already exists and make it look completely different with a skin change, and a lot of that was just texture work and careful modeling, without not wanting to damage the original asset. So at this point, there was a lot of prop modeling, which was, like I said, the exact opposite of what I was saying before, which is, the prop modeling isn't everything. But at one point, we were doing quite a lot of prop modeling on Fortnite, and then as time went on, we began to do more of these environment sets, and so everything in Fortnite has to be modular so that the player can break it. And so that was a new, completely different set of skills than I'd ever used before, and having to learn how to build something that doesn't look like it's made out of blocks, that can conform to the way that the game's made, was really important. And so every time I would do something, I would kind of put it in my portfolio.
That's amazing.
Thank you. And then at the same time I was doing all this, I was doing like a personal project in my spare time, and so made a scene that was trying to be more realistic. And so this was like me learning how to use the cinematic cameras in Unreal Engine, doing some stuff with like learning how to make some shaders to do glass, learning how to use sequencer to do like moving cameras, and just doing some sound work even as well on top of it, so that I could make it feel like I made like a video, and I wanted to make it feel like this complete package. I learned how to use like Marvelous Designer and things like that, as well as part of this like process. It was just like, it was basically a scene that I made that would push me to learn a bunch of new skills that I didn't have yet.
That's a good example of how to be a journalist. Like, all those elements in your environment are in need of new skills. It's a great example.
Exactly. I didn't want to learn on the job kind of thing. I didn't want to get asked to do something at work and then have to be like, hey, I don't know how to do that. And I mean, it's okay to say that, but would be nice to have already had some experience of like doing those things, So I figured that I would learn them at home and turn the music off. I don't think I'd actually used a Substance Designer before this either, so I was like learning Substance Designer at the same time. I hadn't used the volumetric lighting in the engine yet, so I decided that I was going to give that a shot.
It's a great video.
Thank
Looks
you.
amazing.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. It was a lot of work just to get it finished. It was like the first 90% took like no time at all, and then the last 10% took like way more than it should have taken to get it finished.
That's true for everything in life,
But yeah, that's it. I mean, 20% always takes 80% of your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And at that point, I just decided that I was going to start breaking down a lot of the work that I put into it for my portfolio, just to show like the elements of the scene that I'd created. Because obviously, when you show a video like that, people can appreciate the work that goes into the whole scene, but it's difficult sometimes to appreciate like the individual elements that I wanted to show off, and so like in my constant effort to update my portfolio and to remain like relevant to some degree, I just decided that I was going to start doing some renders for that stuff as well. If I was to go back in time and do it again, I think I definitely would use a lot more of the Megascan stuff, because I made a lot of this stuff by hand, and that's something that I'm going to do in the future, is to start using Megascans more and experiment with making something like even more realistic using that stuff. we done on time? Am I just rambling on forever?
Yeah, good. You're in the last couple pieces. So.
Yeah. So this is something I've done pretty recently. It was just some more personal work, learning the real-time ray tracing that was released in one of the newer versions of Unreal Engine. So I was just like playing around with that, and this is a good example in what we were talking about earlier with the building a scene, where I did like here you go, this GIF, where I was showing like the layers and like in the order in which I built things.
Yeah, so any educators in the scene, just show them a portfolio like this and say, just make it like this. Do all your stuff. Do it like this one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely put a lot of work into trying to fill it all out with stuff that I'd want to see myself, and just become better at working with Unreal Engine.
Awesome.
Cool. We good?
Yeah.
Amazing
Fantastic.
stuff.
Cool. That was probably the most terrifying thing I've ever done. So
it's like doing an interview in front of 500 people, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like doing an interview, and then you're like, you don't want to show off your work and then be like embarrassed by it or something, I guess.
People are like,
no, really, thank you for showing that and giving us that journey. And then, all the way back to your student reel. That is, like you said, it's terrifying because you're showing off your work, and your work is so personal. And even when, for those students that are out there, even when you are as amazing as Scott Homer, you're still like you said, Scott, you're intimidated by Quentin.
Yeah.
Like, and there are people who are like, "What? How could you even be like? You're so good."
No. That's the whole of Epic, right? It's like you walk around and it's just like creative geniuses everywhere, and it's like people that have like achieved so much in their lives, and you're just like, you just want to be. Everyone feels the same, I'm sure, as well. I'm sure everybody there feels the same way, intimidated by each other.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Definitely.
Great. Shall we jump into Quentin's portfolio and have a blast over there?
Well, you say that, but I don't have as remotely close amount of things to show Scott has. So it's a different it's in a different way. Let me share my screen. Can you see that?
It's coming, yeah. There we go.
There we go.
I'm not sure which one to start with. So as you can see, much less stuff than Scott. I wish I could put a lot of my personal work in there. I have the tendency to never finish the things that I'm starting out of work. I want to keep my skill sharp and all of this. I am doing some personal work on the side. I just never find the time to finish it. And by the time I come back to it, then everything has evolved, and then I want to try this new thing. And so I don't have much. I basically just have one in there, which is dance contest that I worked on. But yeah, eventually once I find a better routine on how to do this, I will put more. There is also that I came to ArtStation pretty lately. I had a personal website before that I was trying to maintain, and I never did. And then I realized ArtStation was just much, so I started to go. Yeah.
Well, and that's not to interrupt a billion times, but for those that are out there, you don't have to go make a website and go to Wix and spend all that time.
I definitely agree. Like right now, and now ArtStation is so popular that it's used by the entire industry. Great platform. There is no reason to make it, like just use the great tool out there. That's what I was saying before. Well, jumping in, I'm gonna start with this because that's maybe the project which is the closest to what Scott is doing and the closest to Unreal. And again, I started to work on Unreal 1 year ago. So for me, it was much more like transitioning my skills from the movie industry and from how to make visual effects environment in Unreal, and it was an absolute blast. I don't really know where to start with this. I got given the opportunity to work on Unreal 5, which is it's a beast. Like, in the visual effects, you have to optimize as well, the same you have in video game, in a different way, because we are usually less looking at poly count, and it's more like render time by frame. But you still have to optimize. And when I got to Unreal 5, just like I knew that coming to the game world, I would have to adapt and start to optimize my asset in a different way, maybe put less polys, having less big of textures and all those things. And just Unreal 5 just blew out all those preconceptions because it's the beast. Like, you can throw whatever you have. You can throw your ZBrush model into it. It just runs. It runs with real time. Same thing, like, I am used to ray traced engine like V-Ray, Arnold, Claris. That's what I've used to make my images before. So I was kind of used to have the tools to make an image photoreal for all this time. And I was thinking that going to the game, I would have to give up on a lot of this because it's not available in real time. And same way, Unreal 5 just threw out my preconception of it, because it does exactly the same as what not a ray tracer, but it has as good quality as what a ray tracer would. And well, this is a good example. We basically, on this project, we went to town. Like, once we realized the power of this, we are like, well, there is no reason to limit ourselves to anything. We're just gonna crazy the amount of detail. One interesting thing to describe here is that, we started to make this canyon. We tried a lot of different approaches. We knew the canyon would be giant. We knew we would have to cover a lot of real estate, like the proper way. And we didn't really know how we would be able to produce this amount of rocks to cover all of this. We started with a very procedural approach, starting to make procedural rocks in Houdini. And we actually got very decent results. The thing, though, is that that's about the same time that Epic has acquired Megascan Pixel. And we got access to a lot more scans, and we just realized the scans are unbeatable. Like, it's basically a 3D photo. So we started to use this all over, and we came with, like, smart ideas on how to make it not repeatable, and that was part of the technical challenge of this as well, to make it look like it still feels natural, even though we only have few pieces. Now, that was a blast to work on. I cannot technically describe the pleasure you have to actually build your environment looking like this in real time, and it doesn't lag, and it's a blast because it just removes a lot of the constraints.
I mean, even in film, you had to work.
Have.
You had to work with a lot of proxy geometry, right? Like, when you have huge, massive 10 mile by 10 mile environments in film, you still have to put proxies, and then you don't actually see it until it renders, right?
That's exactly true. Well, depending what software you are using, it is very true. So, at the end of my VFX career, I was using a lot of software named Claris, which is actually pretty good at showing off lots of polys, and you didn't have to use proxy so much when you are working Claris. But still, even though it gives you a very instant feedback with a lot of details and everything, you still have to wait for the render time of your final frame, which in that case was pretty long. And it's a different thing. Here you have basically a viewport of a regular DC software like 3ds Max or Maya. It's the viewport, but the viewport just looks like your render, and there is no more limit. So
nobody believes that, by the way. We keep telling everyone.
Okay, so let's great that nobody believes it, because I worked on that demo. I've worked with the tool, and I can ensure that all of what you're looking at is true, and all what they're saying is true. And
That's
I cannot
amazing.
wait enough to have Unreal 5 released to public, so people can see with their own eyes what a beast.
Going to be very
I
exciting.
definitely think the longer people have worked in rendering, whether it's games or film or whatever, the more they are disbelieving that this actually works,
Literally,
because we've been waiting for this for decades, and now it's suddenly here, and it seems, where's the catch?
yeah, exactly.
We're all
And
like,
and you know, I've been rendering images and setting up renders for pre-rendered images for 20 years before that, and so I had some pretty grounded and pretty deep roots on how you are supposed to optimize something and make it render fast. And even though when I was coming with a photoreal image like this, which would take 2 hours to render on a very strong machine, I was happy. I was like, I did a good job at optimizing this. It renders fast. It renders in 2 hours. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm moving to Epic and I'm given the opportunity to work on Unreal, and I have the same result 30 times a second. And actually, I still have a hard time to believe it today. But I'm like, what's the trick? I don't get it. Like, how come I had to wait 2 hours before, and all of a sudden on the same machine, I'm able to do that 30 times a second? I did the calculation of the ratio once, something like 400,000 times faster, which, you know,
oh
it
yeah,
doesn't make sense at all. It's hard to grasp, but
yeah.
it is true. This thing is just a beast. And it doesn't stop. So, well, the ground truth about this is, you know, we made an environment for the demo, which is probably the very best case scenario, what Unreal Engine 5 would be the best at, which is a lot of detailed rocks. There is not a lot of reflection. We don't have a lot of vegetation. There are still things to get improved, and we have made those images with that in mind, trying to show off the maximum potential for what it's the best at. But still, it is again, I cannot describe this, how much pleasure that gives you. I have to create your virtual environment, and it just looks like real instantly, and you feel a little bit like God, you know, like there is no limit. Like, you literally have a world where you can do anything you want in there and create anything you want.
That's gorgeous.
This is so incredible, man. This is so good.
Well, you know, I cannot emphasize enough how much it's about the technology. I don't want to diminish any of the artist work. We had a lot of talented artists working on this. I'm very proud of those images. I think it looks great too. But this has been possible because they gave us the technology to do it. You know? And that they came with such a beast. Right now, it's amazing.
Let me ask you a
really
question.
amazing.
So in an environment like this where you are, you know, you have the speed, did you find that you had to iterate a lot? You know, did you know, Jerome was art director? Did he say, you know, we'll try it like this, try it like that? You know, was there a lot of
Well,
iteration because
yes,
you had?
yes, we iterate a lot, of course, but this is true in every single piece of project you're going to work on. Usually, what is the limit of iteration is not so much the tool, is the time. So for any given project you're going to work on, you're going to have, I don't know, 2 months, 3 weeks, 1 year. It depends. It depends on the project. What's going to happen is you're going to iterate on everything as long as you have time.
Yeah.
The best part of this is that you can iterate much more because it goes much faster. One problem that we had in the VFX world for a long time is that when we were making very complicated scenes, and I'm going to go on it after, so we can talk about it more, but you know, setting up the scene, setting up the assets, setting up the render, and waiting for the render to cook means that you have one iteration a day at best. You have to send your renders overnight because it takes hours and hours. You need to have a render farm, meaning like thousands of computers dedicated to calculate the images. This is a lot of resources, and you can iterate once a day. At the end, I told you, if you have 2 months, then you're going to iterate 60 times on it.
Right.
When you have a tool like this, you iterate 60 times in 1 day, which means
Wow.
what? That means you're going to keep iterating as long as you can push the thing and make it look better. But you have much more trial and error, which is why it's much easier to achieve something that looks good when you have a tool that complies with this paradigm.
That's amazing.
And well, what's amazing as well is, you know, like the world that we've created, it's one path that the girl is taking in cave, and then in arena, and then in the big open world. But all of this can be loaded at once in the engine. It doesn't have to be, there is a lot of streaming things happening when you are building up games, because you have to save resources for this part of the environment, which is heavy, or this character, like this boss, that's really heavy. Where here, with that new technology, basically the engine is doing that for you, and you can have everything loaded, and you just can fly around. I wish they would release like a breakdown of all of this, so we can actually show people how it is in engine. But it is in engine exactly the same way it is in game, in the demo. Like there is no cheat. It is exactly how it is.
That's such a huge difference in workflow.
It is insane. I cannot emphasize this enough. So you see, for example, the big project I worked on before, I had some other in between, but I'm not necessarily putting everything in the ArtStation because I don't think it's always interesting. I worked on a Six Underground, which is I called it right before. It was a realistic environment. We recreated a dock in the back, but I don't think this has any value as an artistic creativity or anything, so I'm not putting it there. But Aquaman was a good example in comparison to an Unreal 5 demo, where it's the same type of things. We have an insanely detailed environment. We have to create tons and tons of assets. We have to deal with the environment being able to be rendered. Like we have to spit out those images, and this is very complicated because the machine has a specific amount of power it can output.
And this looks like a very reflective environment, so that adds a lot of complexity.
Actually, not so much reflective, but very refractive.
Refractive,
because, in this, there was a lot of things to take into account, like given a lot of vegetation, of course, a lot of detail, geometry, and because it's not for game, we usually don't go cheap on geometry. Every piece of poly is several million poly because we want to have details everywhere. One very complicated aspect in this is that was happening underwater. So we came up with very specific rendering technique to make it look like underwater. We actually it was pretty technical. We had this environment fog around the scene that would react the same way that water does, meaning that it would absorb red color. So all the rays would be basically, every color is described in CD channels, which is red, green, blue, and this environment around the scene would absorb the rays of colors at a different pace, which gives you this underwater feel like this. So actually, that's great. That makes it look underwater, but that's very heavy to render because this is a lot of calculation. And this is as a difference as the game engine. This is brute force ray traced, meaning that every pixel you are seeing has been calculated with ray tracing, and there is no optimization or like tricks to make it faster. It's using the brute force way the light is working just to ensure that you have the maximum amount of realism how the light is real. But anyway, this is a good example because it's the same type of environment with a lot of details, but all the images you are looking at took some of it days to render. So you are setting this up in the software for this one. It's Clarisse. You are setting all of this up. You are making the shaders and everything. I want to say maybe all this process is probably a tiny bit easier than to do it in the game world because you don't have to make sure it's optimized for every pieces. You can a bit more flexible, but you are preparing the same way. But what happens is at the end of the day, before going home, you have set up everything and you're going to send a render, meaning that you're going to let the machine calculate the solution that you have created, and it's going to take a night or sometimes several days just for one frame. So in order to have this for the movie, we have to render it, 24 times a second, which means for 4 seconds, almost 100 frames. And you need 100 machines calculating this for one day. So that's coming back to what you were saying before, the iteration time.
Yeah.
Like you have one iteration over 1 or 2 days. So it's much more tricky to make something look good all of a sudden because you have such a limited amount of tries, which is why coming to and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come to the real time, the game world, because those solutions now start to look as good as what we used to pre-rendered frame, but you can iterate much more, which means it gives you much more room for creativity, try and error, and all those type of things.
Let me ask you a question. Coming from film, you had a layout department that probably gave you cameras, and then those cameras in many ways told you what environment and how to frame your environment art. But then you came to Epic, and now you sort of had a very different relationship with camera, didn't you?
So it's a very good question, and actually, you know what? It's not so different. It's working a lot the same way. Like when you're making an environment for a game, you are blocking out how the thing is going to look like. You are giving that to the game designer, and he's going to try to set up a gameplay in there. And once he has the gameplay set up, he's going to send that back to you. He say, okay, the important part of this environment is this because the player is going to go there and there and there. In the movie world, it works almost exactly the same. As the environment department's going to mock up something, so we did a mock-up of that city with all the assets we had. We are sending this to layout, and they start to lay out the move of the character and the camera and where it's going to look at, and they are sending this back to us. Eventually, what we do is we also modify the camera. We move it somewhere where maybe it looks better because we know we have more detail, but we back and forth like this, and it works very similarly. At the end of the day, when you're working, especially on a movie like Aquaman, that movie is 85, not 90% CG. Like all the images you see in the movie came from a computer. Most of the actors are shot on blue screen or green screen, and then we just bring everything back around. What it means is the CG world. Everything you are looking at, it's almost like a video game. Back then, we used to reason more like it's an animation film, where everything we are creating is. But then the work process is very similar. So I'll go back in time. I don't know if I should just go back in time. The one I did before was Valerian. That was very interesting. It was great to work with Luc Besson.
I bet, yeah.
A French director.
Amazing director, yeah. The Fifth Element, right?
I don't have the sequence as a playable thing in here. I should find it on the art station.
It's a beautiful film too.
But yeah, this was also the same type of thing where we have this crazy environment. This is a desert. It's like an alien mall, which go over 500 floors of no shops. This was very interesting because technically it was really difficult to do and to create this size of world with this amount of detail and making it having the ability to render it. That was the part. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. We worked on this for like 1 year. All those things that I'm showing, I was environment supervisor on this. So I usually have a team that goes from we were about 10 on Valerian, we were about 30 on Aquaman, and what I'm doing is
you were 10 on Valerian. Like how much concept art? It must take a tremendous amount of concept art because that's not even stuff that exists in the real world, right?
Yeah. So, but that was the fun part on Valerian. We didn't have so many concept art. We had some. I mean, and we had some from very talented concept artists. But like what would happen in the movie in that environment wasn't very clear yet when we started the movie. So we actually built it the very same way we would build a video game because we didn't know where the camera would be so much. And well, I used to joke around with this that in the big VFX studios, they are usually considered as expensive concept artists. Like they come to us, they don't really know what they want yet. They have a vague idea. They come up with 3 concept art, which looks usually pretty good. But then halfway through, they change their mind and they want something different, and they're not going to go back to the concept art team, and they're just going to say, you know what, can you make it? And we eventually making it with all the details. And they're like, no, well, that wasn't really what we wanted. And so that's why we become expensive concept artists, because we make a final image available for the movie that will end up not being used for the movie. It's happening a lot more than you expect. Yeah, and so, well, before that, there was Star Wars. So, I mean, I cannot describe how proud I am to had the chance to work on this. I was a Star Wars fan from youth. That was the project that brought me to the industry and that made me willing to do that job in the first place. I managed to come to the company that make it. When I got in ILM in 2012, it wasn't yet an idea to make new Star Wars. And it just came up after. And the timing just came perfectly. Like when I started to work on this, I was already 3 years in the company, so I had the time to prove that I could work on such project. And I got taken as a lead environment. And yeah, and I was just thrilling to create those environment and those background images for such short movie. It was I'm not gonna lie, it was extremely difficult because you know, everybody's looking at you on this. Like the entire world is looking at you. It's like they are expecting something amazing out of Star Wars, and the level of attention to detail we put on this was almost too much. It was difficult. So we worked on 1 year on some shots, and you know, 1 year it's one frame, and we just keep redoing it over and over until it is perfect, until we know we have satisfied every Star Wars fan in the world that we're not going to get called on anything like that's not supposed to be the right place or this or this.
Yeah, and that passion's not going to change, and that strive for perfection doesn't change. So, being able to, like you said, make things 400,000 times faster is huge. And you go from maybe one iteration a day to 60, and that, you know, now you're talking about maybe you can get to that point of being happy with the result instead of a year. Now, maybe, you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's what a huge difference.
There is one thing to keep in mind though with this, like the time will never change. Like not because you can iterate 60 times on something that you're gonna get through the final result faster. It just means you're gonna get the same amount of time to do it. It just means you're gonna have more tries to achieve this. This movie was a good example. Like as long as we were not happy with the images, we went all the way through the time we got. Like some of those shots finished 2 weeks before the movie came out because they used all the time available to keep making it better.
Interesting.
Like, on this project, that was
so the time is the same. Just you can now pack more work and more quality into that time. The times, yeah.
Like
that makes a lot of sense.
That was the first project we started to use Claris. That was a blast for us. That was a major change, and it was already we were iterating much faster. That was pretty great. This project is it's special for what it is because it's Star Wars, but it's also special because you know Star Wars as the difference, for example, as a like Valerian, where Valerian you have this crazy camera that flies through the world and everything. Star Wars not only doesn't fly, it flies through the world sometimes, but we add a lot of those iconic shots, which they are making the environment the hero of the movie in a sense, and that was especially interesting for us as artists, given such an opportunity to you know demonstrate hero shots like this. That was a blast.
That's beautiful.
And that was tough. That was tough.
And then you motion blur it. What a crime.
Yeah. If you knew, I mean, the motion blur is one thing, and you know, the sad part is those are the best quality images that I can get from the movie because I don't have access to all the working file. I'm not technically allowed to show it, and the only thing that I can get out of it is what's in the movie. Now, this is true that you know you're going to spend 6 months to make this crazy environment piece, like for instance, this is inside of the Star Destroyer where they're flying. You put all those details in there, you can count the bolts on every piece of, you know, stairs or anything in the back. We are asked to put all the details possible. And truth is, at the end in a movie, it is motion blurred, and that's the best image that I can get out of it. But that's how it is. The truth, and that's something we learn in visual effects, is that, you know, if you don't put that bolt at this place, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but usually you kind of need to put the amount of detail to make sure that even when it's motion blurred, it still looks definitely real.
Because, you know, people's eyes pick up on that. We kind of fill in the blanks, and if you're motion blurring, you know, something that's not detailed, the motion blur is not going to be detailed. And we can, you know, the motion blur is there to help fill in our own perception of motion and to fill in that time, and our brain kind of fills in those spaces. So yeah, you do have to have all of that in there, but it's got to be a little more satisfying in games, maybe, to know that people might stop and look at your environment art for a little bit. Because I know I've been killed in several, you know, matches staring at a wall texture, like looking around a corner, like, is that normal mapped? How'd they do that?
Coming back on Tomorrowland, that was pretty interesting to do, making a futuristic city. A lot of fun. This was on 3ds Max and V-Ray, so much more conventional pipeline than what we had at Paris. It works pretty much the same, and you know, you're building the assets, you are making the textures, you are making the shaders, you are framing and making the composition of your frame like you would for a nice landscape. For instance, is just that futuristic city. So on this one, we had a concept artist team working with us, where it was, you know, a back and forth all the time. We were provide them with this like more final looking, and they would paint over it, or they would come up with totally new concept art of build it, and it was going back and forth like this. It was a pretty fun project. One interesting thing that we can see in there, and I'm going to jump right in, art that I've worked on, but is that, yeah, you see that they have this on blue screen. They don't have pretty much anything, and we are creating the CG environment in the back the same way we would do for a video game. Like every bit's coming from the 3D engine. There is a breakdown a little after this, right, that shows you a look on the world from far away, and this represents the different passes, because in text, we are never rendering the frame as a final frame. We are always rendering a lot of different layers, so we have more control afterward. Because, you know, if you spend 20 hours to render a frame, and you want to change the color of one thing, it's getting a bit difficult that you have to re-render the entire thing just to show. And here you can see that's the actual CG world that we've created. So a little bit like a video game, but maybe the exception is that if things don't look so good out of the framing of the final shot, we don't care so much. And we only touch it if he ends up being in the first frame of the camera. So here, you know, like everything looks like it's a city living, but if you look a bit to the left or a bit right, it's actually not populated the same way. And obviously, we would like, for example, you know, a piece of trunk like this, which is more in the foreground. We would brush it, put a lot of detail. We would not bother so much for something in the back, or if we know that this thing will never be seen close, which is something you cannot do in games, because you never know if the player is going to that thing in the back, you know.
Yeah.
Captain America, that was pretty fun too. It's a different style. Like on this, the goal was to make it look really realistic. The constraint from the get-go was that the storyline is happening in Washington, D.C., and we just cannot shoot those type of shots in Washington, D.C. because of all the restriction. You cannot fly a helicopter in there because house, you know. So they still wanted to have this. On top of it, they wanted to have this big building in the middle, which is the headquarters of the shield. And the actual Potomac River that goes through Washington is too narrow for this to happen. So they basically asked us to recreate Washington, but just with a larger river, so we can put that in there and we can film it from places that we are not allowed to show the world. So we basically had to redo the entire environment 3D and put those what we call the helicarriers in there. So you see, like that's a good example because as a generalist in industrial light and magic, we would work on literally everything on that frame. Like we would make the environment, we would model, we would texture, get the start of it. We would make the scene assembly inside 3ds Max. I didn't model the helicarrier by itself. This was part of the modeling department because it's a hero asset and it requires a lot of details and time. But for that very shot, they asked me to take the model and modify it. So we have more detail for up close because that was one of the rare shots that we look at this so close that it would need extra details to hold up. And we wouldn't have this amount of detail everywhere on the ship because we wouldn't see other part of the ship. What I mean.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of detail.
But so it's interesting to see that for the visual effects world, it's more based on the frame and what the camera is going to see.
Yeah.
Push the amount of detail really for here, where in the game we have to go a bit wider.
Mm-hmm.
But so when you see those images, everything is CG, and we had to rebuild the CD to make sure that it is exactly like the same Washington city, and that we could blow up carriers above it without harming anybody. And yeah, eventually we just send the carriers to the. What was very interesting on this is that we were having a straight comparison to the real world, so we couldn't really cheat. We had to make believe that this is happening in Washington.
Wow. I mean, you start to see this stuff, like in the Spider-Man movies and everything, where they're recreating these huge cities. It's quite astounding the amount of detail that I think that we're going to start being able to see in Unreal Engine 5 too.
I think it's already powerful enough. It's just it just needs a bit of time for probably the movie industry to adapt to it. It's a different world. Currently, it's an engine that has been made and developed to make games out of it, not to render frame sequences composited for a movie. So they are like it needs a little bit of adaptation, but it's definitely powerful in quality that we are used to. This is interesting. This is the only, actually no, the only of the two personal project that I have on the ArtStation. That's a piece of work that I did on the side. It was 13 years ago. That was when I wanted to enter in ILM. It's a personal project that I keep adding to time as soon as I can. I'm pretty fan of flying and planes in general. I did the design of this like futuristic jet fighter. When I was willing to go in ILM, I was Transformers movie, not so much about the movie itself, but more about the technique and how to do this. I was always impressed with the itself. I wanted to create my own piece, so I made the modeling, the texture, the rig, all the things. I went to shoot some HDR photography, the beach. With it, I did the concept art too, because something that I didn't mention, but before being in the movie industry as a 3D artist and environment artist, I was concept artist for a few years. I was in Ubisoft. So I was doing the concept of it, and it shows a little bit what when I was talking about being generalist is really the entire scope from the concept art to the final render, passing playing. Well, this is my little piece of personal work. I keep adding to it when I have time. Never have enough time to make something really different. Lately, I decided to stop the modeling because my eye evolved, like from just a pure design standpoint. I want to like tools to do it, and nowadays trend of design. But that's something that I've used actually. It's interesting because coming back to what Scott was showing, that's something that I've especially used to get hired in ILM to show some photorealistic type of rendering and like what type of thing that could be or like science fiction. That was part of my reel to hired by.
Great
Incredible,
stuff.
man. It looks so good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, it's not in a great order. I should probably change that, but that's what I worked on Pacific Rim, because that's when I entered Ireland. That was the first movie I got to work on. I had no idea what Pacific Rim would be back then. I'm gonna skip. But okay, that shows pretty much how we set up the work on this.
I've always loved the color of the movie, and just that.
Yeah, the color. So
that's soaked neon.
That's the
lighting that it has is so distinct.
The director Guillermo del Toro is just amazing to work with. He's so creative. He wants to. He has so many. It's just so creative. So much to say about every frame. That was a blast. For me, what was the blast was also, it was my first project in ILM, and that was the first time I was confronted to such a scale of environment, because before I was used to smaller things like commercial or game cinematics, where we would limit what we would do because just of the amount of technological power we have at our disposal. We couldn't just do a city under at night with all the lights and light from the GI and the rain interacting and all the effects. That's just something we couldn't do. And arriving in ILM and being confronted to this scale of project was just amazing.
And destruction.
And destruction. But so interestingly as well, yeah, you see that on a movie like this, the environment team will interact with layout, but also with destruction, because we would provide some of the assets to be destroyed by the destruction department. And then we would send that to layout, and they would character the enemy take over. So, and then that would be rendered separately. The environment would be rendered in a way, the characters would be different way, and taking. Yeah, and the last bit. Okay, so this is there's one thing that I have done, the materials contest. Like one thing that I've done once I got a little bit of spare time. I discovered Substance Designer pretty late. I started to like we were using all sorts of ways to make texture. I was using Nuke a lot, which is made for same way I would use Substance Designer. And okay, I discovered this very late. Some guys at work showed that they started to see some really amazing coming out of it. And I just wanted to have these skills in my skill set. I just wanted to jump on it. And I saw that contest happening online. And I'm like, oh, great. I have a bit of spare time right now. I'm just gonna jump right on and try something. So that the good part is that my knowledge from the nodal type of workflow helped me a lot to understand Substance Designer. It felt pretty natural, pretty fast, and I found my marks pretty fast on it. And I did this piece, which got awarded actually. So I was pretty happy with the thing, and that's beautiful. That's the very reason I created ArtStation in the first place, is because we had to, like, the way we would communicate on this ArtStation. So that was the only piece that I got on there for like 3.
Well, I'm glad someone convinced you to put your stuff up, because it's so cool to be able to see this stuff, and it's something that I talk about a lot. That I think is really amazing in the world that we live in now. Is never before did anyone really have access to seeing this sort of stuff outside of like Cinefex or whatever, and even then that's a really expensive magazine that only some bookstores carry. So I used to go and look at it at the bookstore and be like, neat, I wish I could buy this thing, but I've got rent to pay. So now you can get on ArtStation and see behind the scenes at this Unreal Engine 5 demo and work that you've done on these movies. And and then be on this stream and be able to talk to you and
Exactly.
hear your
Just
story.
to
It's
be able
so
to
astounding.
share it so easily and show, and everybody can just go right on ArtStation and have this right away. Yeah, this is great, really convenient. Yeah, actually, funny enough, like I got hired by ILM, and then I got hired by Epic right away. I didn't need ArtStation to find those, so I never really put on it. The only reason I have put some stuff lately is because we knew we would have the Unreal 5 demo off, and they told us they would drop this. So I figured I should wait, because but that's I basically did all of what you've seen. I put it on ArtStation like on the last 2 months.
So, our stream has been running for a couple hours now, and we are probably going to have to stop here pretty soon. But I want to say a couple things. First thing I want to say is that yes, there are environment artists that come from the United States. Yes, I know one guest is from the UK and the other one's from France. But yes, we do have American environment artists as well. I know that's a joke. But one thing I wanted to ask is, if you guys had to give advice, to the students and instructors and trainers that are participating in the stream today, what advice would you give? You've shared a tremendous amount of work, and we've talked about a lot of things. But as we're sort of wrapping up today's stream, what kind of parting sort of advice would you give to those people training environment artists, anyone who's aspiring to be an environment artist? And maybe we'll start with you, Scott, to give Quentin's voice a chance to rest for a few minutes.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think it's always be hungry, right? Like I always like to be hungry for to learn new things and never rest on your laurels. It's like as soon as you get in industry, it's like there's this temptation. And I definitely know that I've fallen into it a couple of times of just being like, okay, I'm at my dream place. I'm at Epic now, so I'm just going to start. And then I think that it's really important to just keep learning new skills and stay relevant. I mean, look at the last example that Quentin was talking about, learning substance designer. That was like a whole new shift in the industry, and we all you have to learn those things, and it's like you have to kind of be humble yourself a little bit and go in as a newbie again and learn those skills. And being hungry is the thing that makes you do that.
I really wanna bounce on this. Something very important for the artists out there trying to work in this industry: never be afraid of any software. Like, this is just a tool. You are an artist. Your job is to create images. Your job is to create a piece of art. So again, this word is overstated, but that's what it is. No matter what's the best tool to do art, just look out and try to find what's the best tool. If you have this new piece of software that is great at doing it, but you don't want to jump on it just because that's too much to learn, or it's going to slow you down, so you're going to stay in your comfort zone. This is one of the worst things. You need to go and put yourself out of the comfort zone, learn new skills. And the truth is, with software, and which is just a medium, what you want to do, you start to learn one, you start to learn two, you learn three, and then you got the hang of it. They're all working the same, more or less. And once you know 3 or 4, you're just gonna get the new one pretty fast. It's just another thing to make you better at what you are doing at the end, which is like an image, And do not be afraid of learning software. This is of your concern.
Absolutely. How about you, Quentin? Would there be other things that you would recommend?
Well, it depends in what scope. If I think Scott, what he has shown is great. How he tailored this portfolio for specific place. It's a great example. In that scope, there is not much more to say. everybody has shown, like, work towards this. Look, also look at what is out there yourself, like a standard, and that's the type of things you need to achieve to come to a place like this. And don't lower yourself too much. Like all of this is possible. We are just using pieces of software again. This is accessible to everybody. I don't really know what else to say. But yeah, don't be afraid of software. That's such
great
an important
advice.
one. I have met so many people afraid of software. I think this is not care, just what's best.
Great. I think there's some people that want to ask a couple of questions. There's one that just popped up. If Scott or Quentin each shared one resource that they found valuable, that new environment designers might find super useful. I guess that's a good question with regards to what, like online resources or something like that.
Well, I have a great one, which like Pixel Megascan that just become even more popular now, acquired by Neil. Like, this is changing the game literally, because before a lot of those assets we had to create manually, and we would try to copy reality techniques that are not exactly, that will not be enabled to make it look real. It's going to make it look great or close to reality, but not really reality. Now you literally have thing ready to use, and that it looks like a picture. So I mean, for realistic environment, at least, this is one of the best thing out there right now. And this is great. Just enable it increase the create for everybody, because you don't have to spend so much time building assets. And actually, this would be another advice that I would have is like, I don't know how I can turn this, but we don't really care so much about this very piece of props, of this very piece of things. Megascan gives you the access to save time on something you would spend a lot of time, but which doesn't have so much importance in the final image. It gives you Lego bricks to build something bigger.
Yeah.
It's like Scott said when you were showing your diorama, that sometimes you have to demonstrate that you know when to pump the brakes, you know when to not pour in all of the detail, you know when to keep things in scope, because there is that constant conflict, the artist conflict between perfectionism and actually shipping something.
I mean, that's video games in general, right? It's just like feature creep and like scope creep is like a killer, It's like you really have to use your time wisely, right? And spend your time. We only have a finite amount of time in general, right? But even more so on a project that's time boxed. And so spending that time in the way that's going to give us the best bang for our buck is like the whole thing, I had another good piece of advice.
When to go out and take pictures of something and build a substance material out of it and spend that time, or just go to Megascans and be like, ooh, rocky cliff, there we go, we're good.
I had another good piece of advice, like a separate. I remembered a good point is always be super nice to each other, because it's like every job that I've gotten through know somebody that I know, like knowing a friend, and then like you work with them, and then they're like, hey, I want to work with you in the future, like why don't you come work with me, like it's like not burning bridges, and it's super important, I think. It's like I would always there's so many people that if I ever need somebody to come and work with us, at Epic, it's like, okay, well, I can remember this guy that I worked with, he was amazing, let's hit him up and see, or this person that I worked with there, like she's amazing.
Very true. Like the social factor is important in our job. We are always working as teams. You are never working alone in your corner, and yeah, that's a great skill to have.
That's absolutely a wonderful piece of advice in this industry. Just be nice to each other.
The intern that the intern that I most recently had worked at Epic in like I think she's like it was in the cinematics department, and she reached out to me once, and she was like, "Hey, I really want to be an environment artist. Like, what do I do? Like, can I move over to the other department?" And she worked super hard and doing her own thing, and she was super nice and friendly, and always said hey. And next thing you know, she's like the intern in the room with us, and she's killing it. So her good nature and her like desire to be hungry for work, like got her the job. So
there's another good question that pops up here that says, if someone is not able to go to university or college, is there a good online route to becoming an environment artist or resources of that nature? What advice would you give?
There's a great one. It's called YouTube. It's amazing. You can
I've heard of it.
Anything. You can find anything on it. Like, if, you look at Unreal or Houdini or Sense, like you have literally hundreds of tutorials out there made by some talented people, professionals, all type of thing. You have all you need on this in a sense if you want to start without going to college. It's great to be in the frame of a organized school and a schedule thing where you can dedicate to a project. But if you don't have the time or the resources to do this, just go on YouTube. You have everything you need. I mean, I do that every day, every single day when I'm doing something at work. It's something that I've never done before. I'm like, oh yeah, I know it's possible. How do you do that? You go on YouTube, you're like, okay, and you start to, and then you discover some new things. And sometimes when you do your own video to say, hey, I found out that this.
that's good advice, I think, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's also there, and I don't remember off the top of my head what the official name of it, but there's a guy by the name of Clint Crumpler who has he's one of the largest marketplace sellers, and also he's an environment artist for many years. But he has an online environment art training class that and if you look him up, you'll be able to find where he does his thing. But he has a group that teaches. He's collected a bunch of environment artists from many different studios, and they do an online environment art workshops, and I think they do them a couple times a year. And the projects that they do are incredible. The student outcomes are really incredible. So I would encourage you to check that out because it's really, really high caliber work. Yeah, somebody popped these up. Oh, they popped up his website there, so check that out. I think we have time.
We also there's on our own learn.unrealengine.com. We have some newer courses that are focused on environment art and game art that are really exceptional. So if you had visited there before and been like, it's all kind of architecture and cars and stuff.
Good point.
Take a look again, because we've doubled down on our games content and making sure that our games folks have the training they need there as well. So there's some really good stuff there.
And we'll take this probably as our last question today before we give some final closing thoughts. But and I think this is an important question. Can someone who wants to get into the industry use Megascans in their environments, or will employees look badly on using content like this that you didn't make, yeah,
no, not at all. Like that, I have to hire somebody. What I'm going to look at is his skill set. Does the skill set meet what I'm requiring? If I want to hire a very high-end modeler for a very specific people, what is showing are already made asset, yeah, that's not going to work. But if I'm hiring somebody whose job going to creating nice, good-looking images, no matter what tool is make this, at the end of the day, this thing looks great, and it, I can see that person has an eye, has something. Say, I don't care that he has used Megascan. It's It really, I would say, really depends on what type of job you are looking for. If
Sure.
you-
Aiming. It's that thing of like aiming the portfolio to the job you want, right? Like it's the same thing. You know, it probably wouldn't be beneficial if you're aiming for, like you just said, like a hard surface modeler job. But if your job is to be like, you are aiming for that to work on the UE5 demo kind of thing, you know, it's like that would be perfect, the perfect part of the skill set.
Yeah, and you know, like we know when we look at portfolios, and we know how things are done, or if we don't, we usually ask. But there is no problem using Megascan if most of the time you have spent on this, trying to figure a way to make that thing look, or to figure out a way to optimize, I don't know, the forest to work in the engine, or this type of thing. Like indeed, if you took 10 Megascans and put something together really quick, it took you 2 hours to do it, I would probably see it, but it wouldn't be a problem if the thing that I'm looking at is great, because I would say, okay, well, this guy has been make something look great. Now, if it doesn't look good, and if it's just a show off of something that you can see is being made to be shown off, like with great looking asset, but I know it's Megascan, yeah, I'm gonna call it out, saying, hey, tell me, I know you got on me, you Megascan and downloaded this and put that here, and like, yeah, that's a bit easy to do, but there is a context to it.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So, do you guys have any final closing thoughts before we end the stream today, Quentin?
I did see a question in the which that I want to briefly talk
Yes,
about.
please.
Is somebody asking about how Unreal would tie to visual effects. The visual effects industry could use Unreal to make images. It's a very important question. I don't have a clear answer right away. My 2 cents on it, that yes, Unreal is able today to look as good, but we are effects. Definitely, it does it much faster. I don't want to say in your way, because there are lots of constructors working, but we spend the same amount of time preparing a final good-looking image effect. That doesn't really matter. But so yes, it is at the quality level that is required for VFX. Now the problem is Unreal working very differently. That the tool we are using, VFX, that means that the visual, we will have to adapt to it anyways. Like one good example that we are sometimes is that, in visual effects we are using what we call, which are the different layers on the image that you give, able to have control. Getting AOVs out of Unreal is not as straightforward as it, and that alone would means that, okay, the compositor will not have as much control that he used to have.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it means that the visual effects world will have to adapt to this.
Yeah.
And it's a big thing. That means they will literally have to break off their current pipeline to adapt to something. But it's you give away something, get something back out of it. Unreal allows you to have your iteration much faster. You don't need to wait for render time anymore. You don't have to wait night for your shot to be rendered. You can have it right away. Like once your environment or whatever you are creating is done in the engine, you're literally screen capping your screen, screenshotting your screen, and this is it. You have your final thing. And if it doesn't work, if they ask you to change this, then you change it and you do a screen cap again, and you have to wait another day. So this is definitely something that is valuable in the VFX world, but it means that a lot of things will have to change in order.
Yeah. We like to say, I think Tom said this first, is that, in the visual effects world, you have to push a button to get the frames you want to keep. In Unreal, you're constantly rendering frames and you're throwing away the frames, and you keep the ones you want to save because you're constantly rendering, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah. Scott, do you have some
frames are so precious in offline rendering.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts from me, did you say?
Yes, please.
I would say, based on portfolio, never put anything in your portfolio that you don't want to do every day. Every single day of your life, because if you put something in there that you don't really like doing, but you're putting it in there because you think that you should have it, that will be the thing that you're employed to do every single day.
That's very true. That's very
That
true.
is fantastic advice.
Mic drop.
That's pretty much it. That is key advice right there. I think all of us have ended up doing something that we're like, why did I say that I know this?
Yeah, I mean, I said I knew Unreal Engine, and then didn't know it yet, so I had to learn it on my art test. So.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, I want to thank you guys. This was a really amazing stream. I think everyone really valued your insight and, how forthcoming you were in sharing all this incredibly valuable information. I want to thank Mark for hanging out and being so helpful on the chat. You were answering so many things in there, and thank you for hanging out with us. I know it's getting super late for you. By the way, Mark's in London, so I'm sure he's ready for supper. And thank you, Quentin, and thank you, Scott, and thank you, Tom, as usual. And, please come back and join us next Friday for another, what hopefully is becoming a nice tradition for everyone on Fridays, joining us for these Educator live streams. And I hope you guys had a good time, because we certainly did. And hopefully everyone who joined us today had a good time. And we hope you stay safe and have a good weekend. And once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.